Hey guys, I'm Larsonthewolf. I'm here again with Simple Fox, and I think we're going to have a really long conversation about this one.
Probably. It's going to, well, at least we're going to make the 20-minute mark.
Yeah. So, favorite question, 1 through 10, what do you give it?
Based on walking simulators, I'm going for a good 9. I'm thinking about a 10, but without a doubt, it's making the 9 mark.
Okay, as an interactive media piece, 8. I want to give it a 7. I really do, but I feel like that's way too low for the quality of the game.
For what we're getting,
especially. Yeah. So I'm gonna go with an 8, a high 8.
We should probably start with its name.
Yeah.
What Remains of Edith Finch was an interactive walking simulator that we both played recently, and as walking simulators go, without a doubt, this one is my favorite.
Really?
Yes.
I have some big beefs with it, and we're gonna have to talk about how the overall game presents itself before we can get into spoiler territory. We'll pretty much straight up say when we're in spoiler territory. Yeah. So it's kind of a walking sim, right?
Yeah.
It very, very much feels like it's starting out as a Dear Esther or a Vanishing of Ethan Carter starter, where you're in the middle of the forest and you're heading towards this area. There's multiple branching trails, and you hear your your character monologue as you do it, right? And there are various things that happen. Did you run across the deer in the very first time?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then you finally reach this house, which is special to the character. It's very clear it's where she probably grew up from the dialogue. And then you go exploring through the house.
Okay, yeah, as she was approaching the house, and the house
was filled with all these little, clearly narrative points, right?
Yes.
It was complete, it was a pigsty. It was completely fucked up, and the house is like this great macabre of like add-ons to the house and stuff. It looked really cool.
Yes.
And in the what's it called? The advertisement. What's it called?
Just the trailers for it and whatnot.
Well, the house's silhouette is
the house's silhouette
is part of the. I'm trying to think. Well, it's part of the title, but a certain term for when you use a certain symbol over and over again.
I don't know that.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it. Sorry, but anyway, it's a part of its identity. Its advertisement campaign was the silhouette of the house, which is like they have an original house, it looks like, and then they kept adding on to it. And the reason for that becomes clear later on. But you go through this house, and it's all good so far, and it still feels like it's going to be this crazy, branching narrative thing where you look at different stuff and you find different meanings, and you'll probably replay the game to understand it. But then it becomes, at least for me, extremely linear.
It is in a good part. I kind of wanted to go through it again, because at first it seemed like there were branching paths. They were different doors that you could go through, but I kind of quickly learned that a number of the doors were locked, or like there'd be 2 branching paths, and you'd have to go and complete both of them before you could continue on.
Right.
So, but I still felt at all points like I never felt everywhere I was exploring was new. Like, here's a new path that I didn't see before. Let's go this way. I never felt like I was so much being pushed down a corridor. I did feel closer to the end, I'm on a straight path.
I 100 felt like the entire game, even, I felt like I was being pushed down the corridor. The game gives you almost no control over its narrative whatsoever. Very little of it. I mean, even when I was playing it at the very beginning, and I had an idea of where it was going, I was like, first of all, I'm playing it, me. And a lot of times when I play these games nowadays, I really do think about them critically. And whether that brings me to appreciate the game more or not is up in the air. But when I started playing the game, I immediately was like, no run mechanic. Okay, so we're in for a Dear Esther style game, right? Yeah. Where they're controlling you at a certain speed so you don't run into other narrative pieces. they can predict how fastly you can get to the next piece.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay, fine. Understandable. I think it's frustrating for a lot of gamers that are replaying it again, but, fine. So that happened, but then when you hit a dialogue box, and in the inner monologue, you'll see different text pop up that allow you to read it. And the game will literally take control from you to put your face towards the dialogue bit.
I did feel it grabbed me once or twice.
It happened to me repeatedly, and it does it a bunch if you're not looking at it directly. And that part, I was like, okay, you're really taking control from me here. This is a really controlled piece I'm doing. And it's to the point where when you finally do get to the first piece, the entire story is backtracing your family history, basically. And about this family that has a tremendous amount of tragedy. I won't go into it too much right now, because clearly there will be spoilers.
Well, they talk about the Finch curse, and I don't believe this is much of a spoiler, but it's the Finch curse is, the Finches are always somehow destined to die.
Early.
Or not always early, but they never die of old age. They die from accidents or from mishaps. They always die before their death, if that makes any sense. They don't die of old age. They die because something went wrong. Something killed them. And...
Well, no. All the Finches... one Finch technically did die early, but she wasn't blood. The nanny, Edie, isn't a blood relative, so she lived until being old. She was a large piece of the entire story. She was married to Odin, ?
Yes.
Which is the original one, and there's a whole story that goes out through the story, and I just threw out a spoiler. I just realized that. I'm gonna cut that. Well, no, I think she actually does talk about Grandma Edie. Yeah, no, that's fine. Sorry, but what I was going to get to, what I was trying to say was you'll find a certain area where there'll be a doily with a respective member's name on it, and there'll be a piece of literature. And when you pick up that literature, your character will begin to read it, or the person that's dead's voice will start to read it.
Yes.
Whoever's telling the story, basically their voice comes over and you start to read it. And then your game will completely change to that person's perspective, and you have an adventure through the story, which is where the game fucking shines.
Pretty much. The big part about why the house got so expansive was no bedroom ever got repurposed. It got sealed off. Whoever last lived in that room, it got preserved almost as a tomb as it was, and there's a will or a testimony or some statement of that person. Like, the first one you find is of... I believe it's the daughter of, like, the great-great-grandfather.
Yeah,
it's
it
Mary.
was Molly.
Molly.
Right.
And I like the stories. Yeah, that's where it came into its own as just amazing interaction.
Right. Each individual story, which is the really cool part, has a different way it was telling its story.
Yes.
No reflection, no flashback, really.
Yeah.
Was different, and it was from that particular person's perspective, so whether or not it was really how that happened, it is to how that person experienced it. Okay, so every single one of the interactions, except for I think the mom with the dad in the hunting trip, I thought that one was pretty lame. But all the other interactions were fantastic. They're all new ways of looking at this interaction and how to do it, and the stories were also pretty freaking interesting too.
Yes, each one was unique.
And at that point, and since it's so extremely narrative based, we're gonna have to get to spoiler territory here, because we're talking around it now.
Yeah, I was about to say we're talking around it. We might as well lay down the spoiler warning and then go into the spoilers.
All right, so
that's where we're at.
Spoiler from here on out. If that's the kind of walking simulator narrative, you should go play the game, and come back and see if you'd agree with us or not. But complete spoiler warning for the entire game now.
Yes.
So Molly's thing
was the first one,
and that set the tone for the creepiness, creepy-esqueness of the game, right?
I really want to know what happened to her.
Like, I do too. Like, the entire that was my biggest one. And the other thing is, I'm tripping over myself. The other thing about the game that I thought that was a bummer was the fact that at the end of the game, I'm like, great, what?
Yeah, the ending kind of bounced. But if we go through the characters, the first one was Molly, whose death is unbeknownst, because you thought most of it was a dream.
Most of it was a dream, but it was what she. It was a great moment for the game overall, because up until that point, you don't know what the fuck's going on. I didn't feel like it was terribly creepy.
Mm-hmm.
I felt it was more of a Gone Home feeling, maybe. I'm
Yeah.
exploring this house, and I'm understanding these people. And I get to Molly, and she's awesome. She wakes up, she's like, I'm hungry, so I go over and I eat the gerbil food. I'm like, that's weird. But
It
she's
was a carrot, yeah.
Yeah, it was the thing. It says, I'm so hungry, and she goes over and, picks the...
Toothpaste?
No, not the toothpaste, but the green stuff, the mistletoe berries.
Oh, those things.
Yeah, she eats those, and then she goes over to the toothpaste and starts eating that. I'm like, okay, this is weird. And then she's like, then I see the bird, and I jump out, and I turn into a cat, and she chases this bird around. I'm like, okay, that's weird. And then I jump on the bird, and I gobble her all up. I'm like, okay. Then I was an owl, and I found rabbits, and I swallowed them down whole, and I'm like, this is getting fucking weird.
It got really weird.
And then, he eats more and more, and she's like, I was eating so fast I choked, and then I turned into a shark, and I was eating a seal, and the seal you didn't gobble up whole, you slowly killed the seal.
Yeah, that was... Yeah.
And then suddenly you jumped out of the water, and you were this, monster, and I felt like I'm not sure if they wrote the narrative one person at a time.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they purposely put Molly first, because hers alerted you that something weird's happening.
Yeah.
And this is the tone of the game
Hers
you should
was
have.
the most left-handed one, without a doubt.
Right. And you're going around this ship and basically with one tentacle grabbing people and
eating them.
Supposedly eating them. You just see them getting dragged away. And then basically he goes down the sewage pipeline, comes up the toilet, and suddenly you're in your room.
You're in your room.
It goes underneath your bed, and Molly wakes up and writes it down in her journal, and that's what you're reading.
Yeah, so her death is unbeknownst. Some of the deaths were straightforward. If I were to guess what happened to her, she got poisoned by something she ate.
Well, that was a story told from her perspective.
Yes. Well, some of them were.
Some of them were biased perspectives, some of them straight up weren't.
Yeah.
But one of the best moments in the game, we'll get to it eventually. I have a feeling we're just going to go down each person and talk about how fucking cool the game was. Because it really is a fantastic game. The way they're telling these narratives are different, and they're each way. But Lovecraftian comes to mind when I'm thinking about the game. I know it's not exactly true, but they have this overall, no one understands why any of this is happening. It's just unbeknownst to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the big tentacle monster was a reflection of the Lovecraftian idea, and I wonder if that's where the game was trying to go to begin with, the game developers.
Yeah.
This is all circumstance, I'm just spitballing here, but that's what I thought. I thought that Molly's scene was was probably the best story to start with.
To start with, without a doubt. I'm trying to think down the line, Molly had a brother, didn't she? It was the
Molly
twins.
had three.
No, the three was later.
Okay.
The three brothers, it was the two brothers and the sister you're thinking about later, because they all shared a room. But I'm trying to think of the next one. The one I appreciated the most was when you go into the basement and find the uncle, who was in a storm shelter for years by the sounds of it.
He was there for 30 years or so, I think he said. He says the trick to it is get into a routine. Time will fly.
Yeah. But that one I thought was a weird contrary, because Molly's was very fantastic. She was flying. She was a seal. This one was a guy in a basement. There was no fantastical elements to it. It was just him locked in, just working through his sanity. And then him just finally deciding to step out of that cage. And he's just looking up at the sun, and
Well, the thing was, the reason he was down in there was because he was afraid of the curse that would come for him. Because very early on, it was told that the Finches had this curse going through their family, and Odin was the father.
The great-grandfather.
The great-grandfather put their house on a ship in order to get away from the curse. The ship sunk, killed Odin, and then they rebuilt the house, and the curse still follows them. So the uncle, when he was young, said, fuck this, thank you very much, and went down into a basement, locked himself in, and he occasionally got food from, I think, Edie. He was giving him food. He was eating the entire time, and eventually he just got bored of it after 30 years or so. Busts out, was talking about, I'm gonna live. If it only is a month, I'm gonna go live. I'm gonna have so much food. I'm gonna live for a week. Even if it's a week, I'm gonna enjoy this, and then immediately gets hit by a train.
Yeah. That one was beautiful to me.
I saw it coming. As soon as he hit the train tracks, I'm like, no.
I was sitting with two friends in the living room playing this game. Like, he's on the train tracks. Get off the train tracks. Get off the train tracks. Get off the train tracks. Yep. Saw that coming. Okay.
Yeah.
There was the other story that brought to my highlight, since I can't think. Some of them were short. There was the one about the rebellious son at the wedding, where a storm just kicked up and he got hit by a tent.
Right.
And some of them were quick, such as that one. I'm trying to think. The other one that I just want to say this was messed up and mean, but it was the childhood star one. I forget whose daughter that one was.
Yeah, that was... I think that's second gen.
I think that was the second generation down, but her story was told through a comic book, which was cool.
Actually, no, because there's Edie's generation, then your mother's grandfather generation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was actually below.
There's Odin's kids.
Let's. I got this. Barbara,
she was in the second generation.
She was the first generation. That's
Or,
Edie's
yeah.
kids. Yeah. Okay.
Edie and Odin, and then everybody comes down off of that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Molly was the first one you found. Barbara's was messed up because it was recorded in a comic book, and my only thought was she was a childhood star.
I didn't understand what happened to Barbara. So did a serial killer get her?
I'm guessing it was some sort of serial killer, but I would rather not. If all we know is that somebody broke into the house, attacked her, cut off her ear, and left it. That's all we know for sure. And I do like how in her story you do learn about the key. Mm-hmm. I kind of want to go back and see if I can do
the
that
funny
first.
thing is, when I went to the music box, I did the music box because I tried to interact with everything I could.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw there was something underneath the music box, and I could still keep cranking, but it wouldn't do anything. So
okay, so that is locked.
Yeah.
So they are controlling some of your progression.
The entire game was controlled, which is my biggest gripe against it. Because, I had very little freedom to explore, and even when you're done with the story, not much was said. I mean...
Yeah. You never learn what happens to Edith.
Well, Edith dies of something.
We know of something. Calvin? Do you remember which one was Calvin?
Calvin was, which one was Calvin? Calvin was the boy that wanted to fly.
Oh, the swing set. That was another one of the shorter ones. That was more of his... I like that one because it wasn't even Calvin talking. It was his brother Sam.
Right. So everything's from the perspective of Sam. Right.
On that one. Sam, I forget how he went to. Sam, I know, made it to the second... Sam had kids. There was Walter...
Sam was the hunter. He turned into the Vietnam soldier.
Yes, he turned into the Vietnam soldier. And you get him later.
Yeah. He dies on a hunting trip.
He dies on a hunting trip because they shot a buck and the buck wasn't quite done twitching.
Right.
So, and it knocked him off a cliff.
Right.
Walter was the man who was the uncle who was in the basement for the longest time. Gus was the boy flying the kite and got hit by the tent.
Right.
Which one was Gregory?
Gregory was the little boy that drowned in the tub.
I remember that one now. That one was sad.
I saw where that was going. I was like, oh, I'm in a tub. I know where this is going.
I called the death the second it started, but it was really slow. They painted that one not so much morbid. That one
that was the other thing. That was like, of the deaths, that was probably the more happier ones.
It was one of the more happier ones.
Which is fucked up when you think about it.
Yeah, it was without a doubt the most morbid and most... because it was a baby drowning in a tub.
Right.
So that one was quite upsetting.
And then Dawn was your mom.
Dawn was our mom who we...
Died of cancer?
I'm guessing cancer. She was a patient in a hospital and that's all you were told.
Yeah, And then you have Milton, who I don't know what the fuck happened to Milton.
Milton was that the
that was
cartoon one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was actually probably my favorite one because it didn't have a fantastical element at all. It was nothing more than a flip book that just showed you pretty much him waving goodbye, and that was it.
Well, he was painting a person. The person basically came alive. He realized the person in the painting was alive. And then he drew a door in the painting, went into the door, and waved goodbye.
Yes.
And the entire story, it was talking about how no one made a gravestone for Milton. They made a memorial. and they didn't consider Milton dead. He was just missing.
He was just missing, and you did see missing posters from Milton,
right?
Even before you got in the house.
very first thing you go in, you see
missing posters.
Missing poster for Milton.
Then there was Lewis, whose Lewis's
story is my favorite.
It was probably the most sad too.
Spectacular.
Yeah.
First of all, let's talk about like you experience these in a different way. Like when you're we should have talked about that. That was a large portion of the game. When you're Barbara, the child star, you're experiencing it through a comic book segment, and you have these cel-shaded, awesome 90s comic book.
And you move around and you hit things with
like an axe and stuff, and you're in that. It was really cool. With Calvin, you were on a swing set and you were gaining momentum as the narrative went through.
And you had to keep gaining momentum to get the next story piece.
When you're in Sam's story, you're experiencing a hunting trip. The one I was complaining earlier I thought was the weakest, and you just take pictures of narrative pieces that were happening. Yeah. And you do it in and out of full focus. For Walter, you were making the actions of him doing the same thing over and over again. The same
routine every day.
Right. For Gregory, the little baby, you were in a bathtub and you controlled a frog jumping around and knocking stuff over and eventually turning on the water that drowned him.
Yes.
For Gus,
you were flying the kite.
Yeah, you were flying the kite, and you had to hit different
your kite was essentially picking up the storm that picked up the objects.
Well, yeah, it did that, and you would interact with different things with your kite in order to move the narrative along.
Yes.
Okay, and then for Milton, you said the flip book.
Yeah, it was just
Milton's was super sick. Of the rooms though, I liked Milton's. Milton's room was pretty sick.
His room was like that little 2-story tower that you wheeled up and down with
and he had like
elevator.
All his black and white art up everywhere, and the kid's like 13, 14.
Yeah, he was a big artist, little kid. So.
Yeah.
This was without a doubt a creative family.
But my biggest thing. My favorite one was Lewis. First of all, Lewis's room was also pretty cool. He had the psychedelic black light posters and like weed and bonds everywhere.
He was, with the PlayStation and all that jazz, he was a pothead, 90s, 70s hippie. Yeah, that was Lewis.
But Lewis's story was my favorite. Like the way they portrayed that, and the story itself was pretty fantastic. Lewis's, of all the others, some of them are diaries, some of them are flip books, some of them are divorce letters, as was the case for Gregory the baby. Yes. But Lewis's was a letter from his therapist, basically, that was trying to help him keep sober, from what I followed. He was the sobriety one, and newly sober, he got a job, he had a job at the cannery, and he continued to that, but he realized how fucking boring it was.
And he started.
So as you're going through this story, you're taking fish and you're cutting off their heads and throwing them on a conveyor belt, foreseeably to be ground up and put in cans.
Yeah.
Right. So you're going through this and you're doing this monotonous task of, with your mouse, picking up the fish and getting its head cut off. But then up in the corner, she talks about how then he created his own world and he explained it was like a labyrinth. And so up in the corner.
Yeah.
Up in the top left corner, you see this person, and you control them with WASD as you're cutting off fishes with your...
You had to do both at the same time.
Yeah, I tried to do both at the same time.
I could do it.
It was multi-time. I could too. And it was cool. And, like, at first it was just black and white and top-down basic person. But as the story continued, he says his imagination got stronger. And since it was keeping his mind off, and she said, and he was becoming a better worker, I encouraged him to keep on doing it. So he gets he's going through this world, and eventually it becomes like a 3D Diablo-esque kind of style thing with more polygons and whatnot, and he meets people, and he has this whole menagerie of like band and instruments playing behind him and all this stuff. And all the while you're still doing this, but if you look, the corner that was his imagination is starting to engulf your screen slowly.
Bigger and bigger and bigger.
And you're doing this and all that stuff. And eventually he gets onto this thing where he realizes, I'm in control of this world.
Yes.
And I can do whatever I want in it. So he held an election and won. And then he jumped on like a flagpole and pulled down the flag like he was a Mario character.
That was cute.
I thought that was cute too. He says, and he started conquering other places. And he was imagining all this in his mind. He says, and he went to find either a king or queen. There was like a whole choice quest
You could do choices. There wasn't much difference.
I replayed it and found out there was no difference whatsoever. Besides the fact that the person at the end...
You either got a king or you got a queen. It was either a guitar or a harp.
Yeah.
So...
But he's cutting off this fish head, and some obstacles in the game won't let you pass unless you cut off a fish's head. It was like tied into the world. It was very unique. But he's doing this entire thing, and the things get bigger and bigger until eventually just the imagination covers your entire screen. And in that point, the therapist says, he was already too far gone. I couldn't do anything. He told me, my imagination is as real as I am. Was basically his statement.
Yeah.
And he held the election, and it basically ended up with him going up to be crowned as king, and he puts his head down in the guillotine.
And it's quite obviously a golden guillotine. It's all made up to look nice, and everybody's sitting there thinking, this is the machine that cuts the fish's head off.
Right.
And
you hear this, and instead of hearing a guillotine slice, you hear the fish gutter slice.
Yeah, that you've been hearing again and again and again.
And
but
then,
as you lay your head down, that's the last thing you hear.
And then you hear the therapist say, your son was someone loved by all. I'm deeply sorry.
Mm-hmm. And that rounded out the story up until you ascending to your room and writing your part of the story, which at this point, Edith had made comments that she was apparently pregnant. And the point of writing her story was so that the tree continues and her... I don't know whether or not they said it was a daughter or a son.
It was a son at the very end.
It looked like a son to me. Yeah. So the wills could keep on going. And it seemed like the curse never killed the Finches off completely. It only ever let the tree go one way. There were no branches. There was only ever the one stem.
That's a good observation. I never thought about it.
So, without a doubt, the story, while it pushed me through a straight line, I'm actually pretty sure I was drinking at the time, so I wasn't paying that hard attention to how linear it was. But I did like the range of stories and the range it told me these stories.
No, the stories
amazing.
were fantastic. And like the different ways they portrayed them were also really cool. And that's why I give it an 8. Like, I want to give it a 7 because of how controlled it was and how little, like, of an experience I had compared to anyone else. Like, you and I right now have the same exact experience, probably.
Yeah. You have to... There's only one way to traverse through the tree. It's first Molly, Barbara, Calvin, Sam, Walter, Gus, Gregory, Dawn, Milton, Lewis. That's the only way you can do it. And then the last two, Edith and Dawn, are wrapped into one story.
Right.
And with Edith, it's just... There was a tide, there was a tsunami way out somewhere.
I want to know what was in the story that, like, she couldn't share with anyone else.
Yeah.
Because the mom felt like if she shared the story...
The curse would continue.
It sounded like that's how she felt, yeah.
Yeah. But...
And then the very end, Dawn takes Edith away in the car and leaves Grandma there. And then they sent senior help to her, and Grandma's already gone. But it sounds like Grandma was planning to kill herself. There were hints at that in the very beginning when she was drinking the wine and the pain.
Yeah.
She said some of your medication specifically says, not shut up, and I'm drinking my wine. And you see wine all over the house as well. So...
Mm-hmm. So, without a doubt, it was a house I wanted to live in, although with some more...
It's a house I live in.
Yeah, pretty much. But there was also the two others. Sven, who was married into the family, was also killed by a collapsing slide, but you never heard about him.
Oh, that's a good point, yeah.
I actually noticed...
He was killed by a dragon, the dragon slide.
The dragon slide, which I noticed that when I walked up to the house, it's out there. I noticed, hey, there's a dragon, and then I read later, killed by the slide. Like, oh.
Interesting. I never thought about that. Because another thing I noticed was the fact that Edith and Milton were white. Mm-hmm. But if you look at Lewis, he's black.
Yeah. Well, that's because Sanjay...
Or at least, obviously, half black, yeah.
Yeah. Sanjay was married Dawn. But you never hear about Sanjay.
Mm-mm.
A lot of the characters you didn't hear all that from. We know it was Gregory and Kay... Or Sam and Kay were the two that married, and they had the kids Dawn, Gus, and Gregory.
Mm-hmm.
And
then they got divorced.
So we don't know what happened to Kay. It seemed like it only affected the blood of the Finches.
Mm-hmm.
Although Sven was just killed by an accident.
Which is why I wonder if you're married into it, does it eventually kill you? But clearly it didn't for Edie. She lived the longest. She had the long life. She was like nearly 80 or some, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But all that we can tell about the Finch's curse is it kills you before you die. That's all it is.
People die when they are killed.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. They don't die of
natural causes. They don't just grow old and die. Edith may have made it to a long year, but they never actually say what happened to Edith. And I'm not sure.
It's just implied she died before she can tell the story to her son.
Actually, if I remember, and since we're looking at the tree, I'm not actually sure Edith was of the family. Because we got...
Edith is definitely the part of the family. She's the blood of Dawn, right?
No. Ingeborg was married to Odin. Now that we're looking at this tree, Odin and Ingeborg were married and had Edith.
Oh, you're right. Okay.
And then Edith married Sven.
Okay, yeah.
And that's where the tree moves from.
Okay,
so that's a small misinterpretation.
Well, we didn't learn a lot about Odin, so...
All we know about Odin is he rode the house like a man.
Yeah.
Which is both impressive and demoralizing that he died.
Right.
But...
So, something I noticed with it, did you notice some of the motifs that occurred a lot in the game?
I'm not quite sure what you're referring to.
Motif is a reoccurring symbol throughout media.
No.
So, for example, in Life is Strange, it's a deer, right? The deer's the motif. It keeps appearing everywhere. It's in a snow globe. It's in a shirt. It's a spectral animal. It's the same thing in Vanishing of Ethan Carter.
What Remains of Edith Finch.
Thank you. Same thing in here. You see a deer in the very first beginning. Deer's the thing that kills Sam and the side there, and you see a deer out when you're in the water with Edie.
Oh, yes, you do. So we have the reappearing motif of a deer in this one, too. Mm-hmm. And when you see that, that's actually probably the conclusion of the story.
Right.
So we got it in the middle of the cutscene and the final cutscene.
Hey guys, it's Larson. I don't mean to interrupt the video, but I had a revelation about this particular point after editing the video for a bit. The fact that the deer appears to some characters may be indicative of how they place on the curse's scale. If you look at the family tree, the deer appears in memories, and those memories are of Edie, Sam, Dawn, and Edith. The thing about those characters is the fact that they're the only ones in the family that continue the family tree. They're the tree trunk, so to speak. I thought it was a neat point. I'll get back to the video now.
So, do we have any more final thoughts?
Not that I know. Would you recommend it?
Very much so.
I would too.
For somebody who's not really into walking simulators, this one without a doubt. I mean, I plowed through it in 2 hours, and I wasn't moving hard and fast trying to get through it, but I was enjoying my time through it without a doubt.
Yeah, no, same thing with me. I would definitely recommend it. It's just as the game, it took so much control away, especially for a walking simulator game. I felt like it lost some points. You were expecting
more freedom to it than it actually had.
It would have been a better experience with more freedom and more things to discover, because there are definitely things in game you were supposed to revisit and look at.
Yeah.
But it's a pain to look through if there's nothing more to discover in the game.
Yeah, true.
If I can't take an alternate path. So that's my big gripe with it. But yeah, it's a high A in my opinion. It's a really damn good walking simulator, that's for sure.
There are small little nicks and cricks here that keep it from reaching a full or a higher score.
Well, there's no game that gets a 10 out of 10, but yeah.
No, that's only reserved for Portal, and that's it. Portal is the only game that shall ever receive that title.
All right.
Laters, everybody.
Later.